The mural located in domain has been the topic of much theories and speculation, and I will make my own take on what I believe the mural to be. Doing so, I'll start by describing symbols and what I believe they represent. At the top are 5 shapes, 4 of which resemble eyes, but also a figure surrounded by a halo. The other symbol is a myriad of shapes: a circle, 2 triangles, and a diamond that extrudes beyond the circle. Altogether, this makes up a 8-pointed figure. Besides being 8 points, hold no real-world comparisons. Beneath the 5 is what I believe to symbolize the 7 sovereigns. Next section will being with 2 olive branches, which encompasses a trichtra, which is imperfect. The trichtra ties to the branches, but also the arrow. Underneath is an incomplete circle, and 3 points going in separate directions. Going down further, the branches are surrounded by 6 eye-like symbols that lead the branches to a spiral or helix. This helix then almost connects to the last section, a triskel. But the helix doesn't fully connect. One part falls short. Now, before I make my case, I want to bring up figure A out that I linked to the mural and further explain my theory of the mural. The shades and primordial one from sun and moon. The moon sisters from the heart's desire. The pale princess, light prince, and night mother. From the pale princess and 6 pygmies. Starting with the night mother. In the battle pass it is said that the queen of darkness took the throne of the kingdom of darkness. In the scene before, she is traveling through a kingdom that is likely not her own, until she is tricked by a serpent in the sky. The kingdom of darkness could likely be an allegory for Tevat. Demons are gods, and in this world all but the outlanders are weak to raw abyssal power, which is portrayed as light on our twins' armor. 1. Well, I believe the second who came and the first heir from the battle pass are one in the same. The sustainer of heavenly principles, who has what is seemingly an affliction/corruption on their arm. A affliction that resembles the same power used in our fight against us. And in the cataclysm, she is stern without mercy and acts with absolute power. To me, she seems more controlled than Lumine. So I theorize that she is in fact the first heir. As the sustainer, she is responsible for the heavenly principles. A role close to an overseer, or maybe even like a queen. Versus our twin, who is possibly acting on orders in a hierarchy. The next figure is the Light Prince, the only male outlander of note besides Aether. I believe this outlander to be the second heir and the sinner. This isn't a strong case, but my reasoning has to do with the battle pass, likely implicating that this outlander followed in his sister footsteps. The only breakaway is if the Light Prince became the sinner, he too stumbled. But seeing how this is an allegory, him simply opposing the throne makes him much more capable than his sister, who is a puppet of Celestia. It can also be said that, since Dane has suspicions about the sinner, we cannot say for certain he is a named figure. But I would make the argument that if the sinner was Ermin, Dane would not be as secretive, but because he hasn't met the sinner personally, but likely still had encounters similar to our own. Meaning the sinner is an unknown figure, even to Dane, eliminating Ermin, which Dane should know well enough. Next suspect is Deshreet, but seeing how he was eaten by Apep, this weakens his chance of being the sinner. Both are still strong candidates, but the biggest unknown would be the Light Prince. The next figure is the 6 pygmies, and I can't say for certain, but I will make a case for who the 6 might be an allegory for. The next figure is the Moon Sisters, who despite playing a major role between the Union, have no counterpart in the Pale Princess. I must warn you that I succumbed to temptation and been corrupted by forbidden knowledge. I have read all volumes of the Pale Princess and 6 Pygmies. And the last volume only strengthens my case. The 6 Pygmies just might represent the 3 Moon Sisters. And the Night Mothers as none other than the sustainer of heavenly principles. Spoiler warning for the last volume of the Pale Princess. I will be speculating connections between the pygmies and sister, and in doing so I will be revealing the last part of the story. The sisters killed each other after the great catastrophe. The pygmies were cursed by the prince upon his death due to them poisoning him. What if this curse caused the fight between the sisters and their demise? The time does add up, as the catastrophe is certainly the punishment of the Seelis race due to the union between the Light Prince and the Pale Princess. Or the Light Prince sharing knowledge of his homeland, either intentionally or unintentionally turning the Seelis against the throne. The couple would befriend the pygmies, and in turn the pygmies would help them. Where was this union held again? the solar chariot, and who controlled this, the moon sisters. The lack of figures that resemble a connection to the sisters in the book is concerning, as they played a pivotal role. Instead, all there is in comparison is the union and the pygmies. Lastly, who is the pale princess? I believe she is more unknown than the prince, likely due to her imprisonment. So the figures and their related symbols. The arrow might possibly be the second throne and the sustainer of heavenly principles. The union, olive branches, have many meanings, but out of all those, unity stands out. A bond between two, even relating to marriage, making the olive branches the union between the pale princess and the outlander. The trichoroidal goddess is straightforward, but its imperfection I believe represents either the identities, conflicting, or the sister, that took pity on the prince. Then there is a sort of line that joins together, and becomes one. After this is the separation of the moon sisters. The 6 eyes are pairs of one, each a sister. This will then lead to the punishment of the union. The helix, which also represents the descent or ascension. One connects directly to the triskel, which possibly represents the abyss, while the other falls short of the triskel. Regardless, the two did not share the same fate, as one is a part of the abyss while the other is a prisoner of Celestia. As for the sustainer being the arrow, my reasoning is the lack of details of the war between the first and second throne. This might either be due to the time span of the battle or the control over the second throne. Either way, I do believe that arrow is separate from the dragon, and holds its own meaning. The arrow connection to the moon sister might be due to their position above them. Now the Night Mother's prophecy and how this strengthens my theory. The vicious Night Mother had already found the princess. She followed the pygmy stealthily, like a wild cat, stalking its prey, her shadowy figure, blotting out the moonlight and starlight. When the pygmy arrived, the princess was already gone. The sorrowful howl of a night owl was heard as the Night Mother arose from the now corrupt fountain. Pitiful creature, are you here to see your master? The vile smirk of the Night Mother exuded the breath of the abyss. If so, I'm afraid all you will find here is despair, you sad little thing. That foolish princess is now in chains. I destroyed the Moonlight Kingdom and cursed her people before her eyes. They will be in an undead state, lingering at the point between life and death forevermore. No soul and no moonlight. The words of the Night Mother landed like cold raindrops on a forgotten tomb. Look at you, you poor pygmy. I wonder what your master will think when she finds out what you have done. Fear crawled through the pygmy's veins and grabbed his feeble heart. The Night Mother left the pygmy to wallow in grief. But first, whether out of some hitherto unknown sense of pity, or simply to see him suffer more, we shall never know. The Night Mother left a glimpse of hope for the wretched pygmy. In thousands of years' time, my greatest foe will descend. He wields a sword that heralds the dawn and wears armor that can reflect the shining sunlight. He shall destroy my kingdom and bring the prince back to life. The princess will then be free from her eternal torment. Until then, I fear not a single soul in the land of night, for nothing will bring an end to my kingdom except for the catastrophe foretold by the prophecy. As for you, the treacherous slave that poisoned his master, fate shall see that you get what you deserve. The Night Mother then collapsed and became a pile of sludge consisting of mud and worms. Devastated, the pygmy wandered around in sorrow and regret. He hid the body in a tree hole and walked off alone into the night, and into a self-imposed exile. Few things that I will elaborate to strengthen my theory. The first and strongest link between the Night Mother and the Sustainer is in fact the punishment of the Seelies, which would be the catastrophe around the time the sisters turned on one another. The prophecy foretold a hero. Being how this is an allegory, the gender should be ignored, especially since the pygmies, if in fact the sisters are males instead of females. But more importantly, I believe this hero to be the Abyss sibling rather than us. They wield the sword and armor. They challenge the gods, and they already encountered what may have been the sinner. Now for Dainself. He says we must save our sister, but must fight him to do so. What if this is due to her dealing with the sinner, or at the end of the game, our sibling finds themselves a prisoner of Celestia, and we must rescue them, and Dain fight is a rite of passage, as if we can defeat him, maybe we can defeat the Sustainer. But what if this fall in line with the sinner? What if the defeat of the Sustainer is rather her being stopped by her brother? Unlike everything else, Rain's dialogue I don't believe to be anywhere near an allegory or stretching the truth, but I do believe Dain to be flawed and biased. So with that, his credibility and motives are questionable at most. Friend or foe? Lastly, I want to speak on Payman, the Abyss Order and Celestia. Payman, like the mural, has many noticeable symbols and aesthetics that might give clue to her place and role. She wears a crown that I can't seem to find any relations to real-life cultures, but does share a resemblance to the dragon's spine sword. She wears a cloak that has the elements similar to the abyss, by the stars and constellations. She has the upside-down trichorda, along with 3 figure pointing inward in the direction of the trichorda. Then is her aesthetics, which link directly to Celestia. That can be found on statues of the 7 and on towers in the title screen. And lastly is her hair, personality and ties to time. This is nothing new, but what if Payman is Istaroth in disguise? The only possible figure to represent Istaroth is the omnipotent god in Inazuma, who share a resemblance to Payman as if a adult version of her. Also the hood, what if she wears the hood for secrecy, versus wearing a crown? Istaroth couldn't even be called by her true name by those she helped, so why wouldn't she try to be inconspicuous? Her wings are a giveaway, but still I think that's just a part of her. If Istaroth is Payman, why is she Payman? Well, what if Istaroth was punished and had her own mind rewritten, or Payman is the pale princess? I don't think so either, but thought I'd just throw that in. Payman as Istaroth would want someone who wouldn't align with the Abyss or Celestia, and being how we are neutral good, Istaroth would accompany us. Payman potentially in a cursed state as nothing new of Celestia. Having been weakened, unable to do much on her own, she would find hope in the Traveler. She is a guide and likely still hold memories of being Istaroth, as her being a guide makes her quite knowledgeable, and her being the god of time makes her knowledge unmatched, especially as one of the oldest beings. Also Istaroth was sympathetic and seemed to at many times gone against the acts of the Primordial One. Payman is also seemingly good-natured, and I do not believe Payman is bad or potential traitor, but rather hiding her true identity for some reason. Basically this whole time, Istaroth is playing dumb as Payman. Not to mention Payman introduces us to the statue of the 7. Lastly, where we met Payman, on the coast of the nameless island. What if this was no coincidence, but rather Payman making her move and alliance? Now the Abyss Order, and Celestia, which I'll have tackle at the same time. Our first enemy is that of Celestia the Sustainer. She judges us for the arrogation of mankind and defeats us in combat. Seals our powers away, basically trapping us on Teyvat while leaving playing in a deep slumber. I'm which our twin joins the Abyss. Now I do not believe our sibling just decided to abandon us, quite the opposite. I believe our sibling went in search for a cure, answers, anything to potentially help the player. In this journey, she found Kenrya, learned the history and joined forces with the Eclipse dynasty. Likely in this time they gained favor from King Ermin, and he would have likely been quite fond of them to name them heir. But in this, I do not believe our sibling to be the sole heir, but rather like a member of the family. Ermin potential favoritism of the twin might have made other members hold a grudge against her, and I say this because I do believe the Abyss Order is now back under the leadership of the dynasty. My reason? The Alberic clan, Kea, left in Mondstadt as the last hope. Why is this? I believe the family has long past left the Abyss Order and actively opposes them. Maybe they met their end in doing so and left Kea away as that last hope. With this, I believe Ermin is back alongside the other high-ranking members of the hierarchy. Also, seeing how the Order is basically evangelist, enforcing their will, I'd say they might be like Holy Knights, or rather the Knights of Templar, which might function like the Knights of Round at the very top. Meaning I believe there are that members will be introduced at some point, likely similar to how the Fatui was introduced. And one of these members has it out for our twin. Which leads me to why the Abyss Order still attacks us. This member is acting alone in trying to get rid of us and uses their underlings to do so. At one point in Sumeru, we are attacked by a Abyss Lector, and he tell us how our sibling has long but forgotten about us as we do not matter, and upon trying to attack us, we are swiftly out of harm's way. Our sibling did stand against us in our first encounter, but also assured us that we will be reunited, and sent us on further into our journey. Plus our sibling upon learning of our awakening had a somber tone as if they missed us. Now I believe the current Abyss Order to operate under King Ermin. His incapacitated state during the Cataclysm was likely due to his forbidden knowledge. That knowledge likely lead to a power, something similar to Foul Legacy, which puts a heavy toll on the user. So it's likely Ermin overexerted himself and other advised him to withdraw and recover. but isn't the sinner. Cloder who heard the voice and is a noble of Kenrya. If the sinner was Ermin, Cloder likely would have known. Also if the sinner was Ermin, I don't think he would refer to himself as a sinner. As their ruler, I do believe he was in favor of the abyss. To be a sinner one must admit their wrongs, and I don't believe Ermin believes as much, neither does Gold, or any other who shared Ermin's beliefs of the abyss and forbidden knowledge. In this I believe there was rift between Kenryans. Those who closest to Ermin likely stood by him. Those who didn't were the ones who fought against the abyss. Also if this is the case and Ermin fought for the abyss, was he not fighting the Archons and those of Celestia? It's possible he and others went into hiding, or he himself went into a deep slumber after overusing his powers. When the order was formed, he and other who were for the abyss would have found a new home. As for Celestia, the primordial one, Phanes and the Shades. I believe Phanes is what would be the ideal god, which the Demiurge uses as his avatar. Istaroth questioned if Phanes was also the primordial one. I believe this is because the true god is the Demiurge, the true nature of the world. A malevolent god. Celestia to me is what would be controlled or lawfully evil. Examples are El Griffith, Light, Yagami, or Lilch Lamperauch, while the Abyss Order is a chaotic neutral. Controlled evil is systematic, the evil as it is usually hidden. While chaotic neutral is goal-oriented by any means. Such as Guts, Suzuki the hypocrite, and L the morally grey, detective, willing to do inhumane illegal deeds, to catch his target. Such is the Abyss Order in my eyes. Well, those are my thoughts. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm wrong, as the story is straightforward, but the lore is the complete opposite with its depth and mysteries.